Because it's my first time ever on a film set. It's not just that it's the first time that a book of mine has been made into a film, but I've never been on a film set for anybody else's book. So everything that I'm seeing is new, and everything that I am watching is so impressive.
It is a populist action thriller that really grabs you and holds you in suspense.
All the productions have the same values to make epic, very filmic television drama, you know, that feels like a movie. It's incredibly high quality.
This is just a cracking, brilliant yarn. It's a great story. It's beautifully shot. It's brilliantly acted, genuinely, and it's very, very cool.
One of the things that people have asked quite a lot, Labyrinth, you know, I wrote it in 2004, published in 2005, and people have asked why I waited to have a film version made. There are several answers, but the most important one is that if you really love your book and you enjoyed writing it and readers loved it, you cannot just give it away, if you like. You have to wait for the right combination of people. And what that means is a director and a screenwriter, and in this case Adrian Hodges, who will be able to take the novel and make it something completely new. Not different, but new, because a book is a book and a film is a film.
And it is a little bit of a responsibility and a burden, because you know that every single reader of this book has created their own world, has created their own film inside their heads. And I think that the job of a screenwriter is to forget that. You have to create the best version of the story you can. You have to be ruthless sometimes. In a way, Labyrinth takes on a new life as a film. It's still the book, but it's something other than the book as well.
Here we had the challenge of a modern-day story with action chases with cars, with practical stunts. That's already a movie in and of itself. Then you have a second period of time, medieval times, which is huge costume drama, and then you combine them all into one project. You're faced with a daily challenge.
It felt to me that it would be much better as television because it's such an epic story. I think you can't cram it into 90 minutes. And Kate loved that we would have more time to tell the story of Alais and Alice. I think we're being incredibly faithful to the book. I mean, inevitably, when you turn something into drama, you have to cut. You know, the book is that thick, and we've only got 2 90-minute films, so inevitably we're going to have to lose some of people's favourite parts of the book. But I think Adrian Hodges has done a fantastic adaptation and has remained very truthful to the book.
And what I particularly liked was the way that the two different time periods worked together, the present and the past. That was really attractive. Now, Labyrinth isn't exactly a ghost story, it's not exactly a supernatural story, but it has those tones, those qualities in it, the link between the past and the present.
It tells one story in 2 different time periods that's absolutely seamless. It goes back and forth between the timelines, but already on the page, you don't notice it. You're reading one story.
The challenge with that is that you have to make sure that you move easily between the past and present without making it seem jarring. And that's partly the writing, partly the directing. It's partly making sure that you make the transition at the right moment, that the audience understands why they're moving between periods.
That's what's interesting. And there's always a way of doing it. There's always a way of finding how to do that in a seamless way. I'm sitting in this room, and this room hasn't changed for maybe 40 years. I feel I'm being watched. So I'll turn around and look, and there's a child standing in the middle of the room who is dressed in clothing from 1910. That's interesting and that's spooky.
To me, they're one story, and they're just separated by a time. And so sometimes we'll be in the modern story and the camera will pan off and suddenly we're into the past and there's no cut. Just to show the idea that 800 years may seem a lot in the life of a human being, but in a depressing way, not a whole lot has changed between now and 800 years ago. When we knew that John Hurt was involved, I was doing backflips. John Hurt's a hero of mine, and getting the chance to work with someone like John, of course, and it was a no-brainer.
Having someone like John Hurt on a project like this gives you the stamp of it being serious and it being real and it being big, because he is such a memorable, mesmerizing actor.
John Hurt I'd actually worked with, and I killed him in the first act. I mean, really horribly, but at least it was celebrated. No one ever forgets that one.
I thought you were referring to the fact that I die in most of the films I do.
This is unique in the sense that the Alice and Alice are very definitely the main central characters. It's their story that drives the whole plot. There are very significant male characters in it. Audric Bayard, played by John Hurt, Will, played by Sebastian Stan, Guillaume. So these are big characters, but it is the girls. They are driving the plot.
I think it's refreshing that suddenly the female is the lead, not the guy. And for instance, Sigourney Weaver, Ripley was a guy. I think it was Laddie said, why don't we make this a woman? And I immediately thought that was a good idea. Certainly Labyrinth, where we are today, there's an attraction to the fact that, it's two female leads. I feel it's less expected, therefore it's more interesting.
It's rare in such a large undertaking for the four main characters to be sort of such strong and sort of empowered female roles, especially when you're doing something in medieval. It tends to be sort of very shy and sweet and nice. And in this, it's not that. It's totally the opposite case.
In the book, they are almost identical in looks and everything. Instead of that, in the film, it's more their heart, their soul, the person that they are, and the way in which they are that links them.
I mean, obviously she's a very defined character, but I think Alice is the one that sort of, she is uncovering, they're more as one, you know, and Jessica and I are so different, and so I think it was important to realise them as being very separate.
Silence for your senior, Raymond Roger Tronqueville.
Casting Viscount Tronqueville, we had to find someone with gravitas who the audience would immediately feel, wow, this man means business. So we cast Tom Felton. He's the same age as Viscount Tronqueville. When he gets up to make his speeches to his people, it will be extremely moving and we will believe him.
Tronqueville is nobility and honour personified, really. He's prepared to die for what he stands for. Not only is he honourable in what he believes in as a Catholic, but also he believes in people's freedom to believe in what they choose to, which was a very strange thing for someone of that time and that period, I think. And after playing so many years on the villainous side, it feels very strange and fantastic to suddenly switch to the heroic side. So yeah, I've certainly enjoyed that as well.
Chris Smith was a director that was on Scott Free's and Tandem's book for a while. We already looked at him for other projects that we produced.
I'd seen Chris Smith's Black Death, and I was absolutely knocked out by what he'd done. It could have been cliché, and he did it brilliantly.
I worked with him before on Black Death, and Chris's energy hasn't changed at all. You know, if something doesn't feel right, he's completely open to change. He'll always make sure that you're happy with what you're doing before we roll.
You know you've done good when Chris laughs like a 5-year-old. And it kind of takes a while to get used to it because you're doing these like really intense scenes and you'll be crying and like you're giving it everything and you've just killed your father and everything's terrible, and then there's this giddy little laugh off set.
Chris laughs before, during, after a take. All times you can be prepared for his laugh, and it's a very infectious laugh as well.
So whenever I like something in a take, I laugh if it's good. And because I know it's good, it makes me happy, so I laugh. And that could be a comedy moment, it could be a death scene, it could be a decapitation scene. If I know it's a good movie moment, I kind of laugh. It's great for actors, they have to get used to it.
And he enjoys his job so much. That's very catchy.
Sorry, cut!
When we were first talking about going from page to screen, one of the things that I knew was nothing to do with me, it was not my business, but I just had my fingers crossed that the decision would be made to film in the southwest of France, even if it was only for a few days.
This piece is all set in Carcassonne in southern France. Logic would say to you, let's film it all in the south of France. We filmed in the south of France for 10 days, and that's wonderful, enough time to actually convince the viewer you're actually where we say we are.
The people from Carcassonne, the tourist board and so on, were very helpful in making it possible for us to work in those locations and keeping the people at bay and letting us shoot in the cathedral.
It's fantastic. The whole place is full of history, and the idea that we're in the same places where all these events actually happened is extraordinary.
And I really salute Scott Free and Tandem for doing that, because This is a novel that is about this country. It's about this land. It's about the echoes in the hills and the certain sort of light that you get in the Midi and the clouds. And it's entirely born out of this landscape.
You really got a sense of what the history was there and what that meant. There's a lot of shots of Alice walking, taking in things for the first time, like the audience would be. A lot of it is so amazing, it looks like CGI, but it's just totally stunning.
That's probably the most interesting thing about the fact that this is based on something that really happened to this town, Carcassonne. And when we were there shooting, a lot of the fortress that was invaded by the Crusaders was still there.
I think particularly with Vanessa and Jessica, you know, to just be here and to sense the history of the place is enormously helpful. Just this morning we've been shooting one of the medieval scenes when Alais and Rixond walk down the castle walls. And it's, you know they would have done that in real life 800 years ago.
So the very first time that John Hurt was on set, we were in the garden of the Hôtel de la Cité in Carcassonne, and behind him was the Chateau Comtal. John Hurt just said, "What else?"
And what else?
It was just quite extraordinary hearing John Hurt say the two most plain words, but it felt quite extraordinary for my words to be in his mouth. This scene today has had a lot of attention because Adrian Hodges understood how important it was. Christopher Smith, the director, understood how important it was. And what, of course, they don't know is that the third one of my trilogy, called Citadel, this scene is echoed in 1942. And I had written that quite recently, but of course they didn't know that because it matters so much.
Thank you for France.
I'm Tom Hannum, I'm the production designer on Labyrinth. It's day 13 of the shoot, but we're on the first scenes of the film, up on a dig site on the top of a mountain in France, but we're on the top of a mountain about an hour outside Cape Town. And we have a big archaeological dig in operation. This is where Alice is going to find the buckle that starts the whole series of events of the film.